Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of My Cast Season 4. My name is Pranavdar.
And I'm Jay Srivastav, and we are your host for the season. For today's episode, we have with us Mr. Vivek Prabhakar, who started one of our favorite brands, Chumbak, back in 2010, with the idea of designing fun souvenirs and collectibles.
Since then, Chumbak has grown into a globally inspired lifestyle brand, creating products in categories across home decor, fashion, and accessories. Welcome Vivek sir to MyCast official podcast. To start this off, this season is about breaking 9 to 5 and you quit your full-time job to be an entrepreneur. What made you quit the 9 to 5 routine? And could you tell us a bit about your journey of starting and growing Chumbak?
Sure. I think, one of the things that we've always loved to do, Shubhra and I, was actually to travel. And that was one of our shared interests. And each time we went to a place that we'd bring back, a souvenir from that place. And we would choose typically fridge magnets because they're the most widely available and also actually the cheapest souvenir that you can find in any place in the world. And suddenly, one of these days we were sitting and looking at the fridge and realizing, hey, listen, we've got stuff from all across the world, but strangely enough, nothing from India. And that started the entire actual, discussion and journey into why aren't there fun souvenirs in India? If you looked at the kind of stuff that, people who were buying souvenirs in India, they were buying like, a marble Taj Mahal or a Pashmina shawl or something like that. And we felt like, these souvenirs probably hadn't changed since the time Genghis Khan came to India or something like that. And those are the souvenirs he probably took back. So somewhere along the way, we felt that, listen, I think we need to modernize this. We need to make it accessible and affordable and also represent India in the way that you and I saw it and not what it was like 400 years ago. So I think that was the first initial conversation that we had. And I think Shubhra mainly spent about a year, almost 8, 9 months on researching the kind of product, researching the kind of, stuff that we would do. And when the samples did finally arrive, I think we started showing them to friends and family. And, they all said, hey, these magnets look great. Why don't you make them on keychains? Why don't you put them on notebooks? Why don't you put them on a t-shirt? And then we realized a couple of things, right? One, we realized that it wasn't just a souvenir company that one was wanting to start. You had to do a lot more than just souvenirs. So at that time, it was, in phase one, what we said was mainly accessories. The second thing that we realized is, listen, it cannot be just magnets. One, you have to sell millions and millions of them to make any money. So that was one thing. And I think the third realization was, listen, this is not a side business. This is something that we're going to have to do completely full time. And you need to invest money into it and go big or go home kind of thing. And that's when we realized, I think on Friday we were sitting at home and we realized, I think maybe over an extra bottle, or maybe the memory is fuzzy right now, maybe it was 2 bottles of wine. But somewhere we said that, listen, I think it's now or never kind of thing. There's no point in trying to, regret that, hey, listen, we never tried out the kind of stuff that we wanted to do. And we made a literal pros and cons list and said, hey, listen, let's figure out what is the kind of stuff that we'd do. And I think in the cons list, it was mainly around, hey, I don't think we'll get a salary for some time. And it was mainly around the money kind of conversation. And Shubhra and I actually, it was literally, as I said, one evening on a weekend, where we said, listen, if it's just the money, then we should definitely do it because money is something that you can always make back. You can always go back to our corporate paying 9 to 5 jobs, and it's going to be simple enough for us to, do these things. But having to live with the regret that, hey, listen, you had in your mind at that time, you had a decent enough idea and you didn't take it to fruition, meaning you're going to have some regrets throughout your life. So that's when we said, like, forget it. We'll see what to do. I think the next morning, Shubhra called the broker and said, hey, listen, we'd like to sell this house. And we just shifted in. I think about a year ago, we had shifted in, and that was our first place. He said, listen, we'd like to, figure out what we'd kind of get for it and all of that. And I think within that was about 2009 is when we started this conversation. 2010 is when we actually finally started in March of 2010. So it's been almost 10 plus years now. I actually look at it at 10 years because, a year of it's been stolen away from because of the pandemic. So I think 10 plus years is what it's been. And I think the journey that we've had along the way has been fantastic. So I think what made us change, I mean, what made us quit our 9 to 5s was the fact that we were passionate about something and we said, we'll give it a chance. What's the worst that could happen? We'll have all these products lying with us for the next 20 years for birthdays and anniversaries and shadi types. We'll be giving people the same stupid magnets for the rest of our lives. That doesn't matter. So, but we'll never live with regret that we never started it. So I think that's what pushed us to say, okay, let's quit this 9 to 5 and do full Chumbak as a full time job.
So, both you and Shubhra ma'am do not have a design background. So, what was it like venturing into a domain without expertise? And what worked best for you?
I think one of the things that worked well was that while we weren't designers ourselves, I think we had a pretty decent eye of what looked good and what didn't. And I think somewhere along the way, while you had decent taste in terms of art and photography and music and stuff like that, I think somewhere along the lines we felt that, listen, there are a bunch of us out there who would love to like the kind of same art that we do, who like the same of photography that we do, who like the kind of same music that we do, or film, or so on and so forth. And I think along the way, Shubhra took this entire role of design director. And in most companies, you have these larger, design firms where you have a design director who may not come from a design background in the sense that actually knows how to draw or paint or illustrate or digitally illustrate or stuff like that, but is able to give direction to their design team who's actually doing the work. And I think Shubhra took on that role from day one, saying that, listen, I think I understand what Chumbak is in my head. How do I now translate it into a brief for my design team to work with? And I think that's what we did from day one. And the second part of it, I think, was very key. Two things actually. One is that we very clearly decided that we weren't a product company, so as to speak. We weren't like doing magnets or keychains or postcards or notebooks at that time what we had, but we were very clearly building a brand. And 5 years later we could be selling anything, and as long as it fit in that ethos of this is what the brand stands for. And I think that's what we started out early, saying that, listen, we have to have to build a brand and around conversation, and not necessarily only about product. So I think when you look at this entire venturing into a domain where we didn't have the expertise, so as to speak, but then we worked with talent that did have the expertise and were able to actually work as design directors at that point in time to say, hey, listen, I have this thought in my mind, can you help me visualize it and put it onto a product as such, and into an illustration. I will take that illustration and then put it onto a product the best I know. So I think that's what worked for us, and I think Shubhra continues to do that, play that role today as head of product and design. She looks after the entire supply chain of from the time you think of what kind of product you want all the way till it's in the consumer's hands from that sense. So I think that pretty much worked out well enough.
Very interesting. So, we see that Chumbak has a strong and a unique brand identity. From products to even your retail outlets, all of them are bold and full of colors. The name itself is such a fascinating one. It sticks to you. So, sir, what is the story behind creating such a beautiful brand? And how did you come up with this name?
So so actually the name itself was very simple because since we wanted to do fridge magnets, I asked Shubhra, who's obviously better at Hindi than I am, saying that what do you call, and we had many names for this company that we wanted to start and the brand that we wanted to start. And I asked her what was the name for what does magnet mean in Hindi, and she told me Chumbak. Bus, that's what it is. I mean, it was as simple as that because it was short. It was the beginning half of the alphabet. It was um, easy to remember and easy to pronounce, and a lot of us have heard it at some point in time. And that's when I felt that, listen, I think the name sounds good enough, and the name is, it can go on to many things in that sense. From a brand perspective, I think very early on, as I said, that we weren't talking about product. We built a majority of the brand awareness that happened in the early days happened through social media. Back in the day when there weren't any things like algorithms on social media or anything like that. A lot of the social media that was available at that time was, a lot of it was free. Well, there was some kind of paid, but it wasn't only paid in that sense, right? Organic posts reached a majority of your followers and all. So I think, keeping that in mind, I think one of the things that really worked for us, that was the kind of conversations that we had with consumers. It was two-sided. It was not just like, hey, here's the product and say, here's a t-shirt and buy it and so on and so forth. I think the conversations moved around a whole bunch of, tell us what your, what kind of music you listen to, or what kind of, this is a kind of new place that we saw in Delhi for food, or this place we visited in Bangalore, which had a great cafe or something like that. So it became more about a lifestyle rather than just product. And I think that's the biggest learning that we've had, saying that, let's talk about what the consumer's life is, rather than just saying, hey, this is a product, buy it. In that sense, there's a lot more around the periphery of the product that's interesting to talk about. So why can't we do that? So I think that really helped us, start the building blocks, so as to speak, for the amount of work that we did over the past 10 years in building brand.
Right, that's amazing. We have to admit that churning out quirky designs is quite challenging. So, what is your source of inspiration every time you create new products?
So I think inspiration, honestly, when we started out, was India, right? I mean, that was our thing, saying that, hey, listen, how do we look at India in the light that you and I see it? It's, if it's very in your face India. For the first 3 4 years, we were very in your face. So it meant an auto rickshaw, or a yogi baba, or an elephant, or that kind of stuff. It's very India focused and India themed, so as to speak. That helped cut the clutter tremendously, saying, because there wasn't any other brand at that time that did that. And since then, obviously, a bunch of copycats came along and tried to scale, but nobody's actually ever scaled up. But the moment we started seeing these copycat kind of things, I think one of the things that we said is, listen, while we like this version of India, I think what we need to do is to move around and say that it needs to be a little bit more mature. Because the kind of second category that we got in after 3 4 years was home as a category. And auto rickshaws are great on a magnet and on a mug and all. But when you're doing dinnerware, when you're doing furnishing, you can't put auto rickshaws on that. It'll not look nice enough. So what we decided is, we decided to move to a, what we called internally at that time, move from India themed to India inspired. So it has a little bit of India, but it's still a lot more mature in its design language. When we introduced fashion in 2014, I mean 2015, we introduced fashion. That's the time I think we said, hey, listen, uh, everything can't be India. So we need to drop that thing. What we've done over the past 4 5 years is that kind of had this very unique visual language, which people identify as a Chumbak design language, so as to speak. Let's just that be our inspiration, saying that, while we're looking for inspiration in nature, in fauna and flora, in prints, and all of that, we're also looking global. So that's when we decided, hey, listen, if the product demands an India theme, put it there. If a product demands India inspired, put it there. But if a product demands something which is globally inspired, use it, so as to speak. So I think we moved to this entire, about 5 6 years ago, we moved to what we call as the Chumbak design language, which is very clear in that sense. So if the theme is minimal, for example, right? And we only do block colors in some categories like that. So be it. And I think that's along the time when we realized that uh, the entire visual language is then what we divided into stories, and became like, the entire brand and the design team and all sat together, and saying that storytelling is extremely important in that sense. So even today, when we work on a particular story, it can be Gond, it can be Ikkat, it could be anything like that. what is our interpretation of an ikat as a story, and how does it transcend product categories? And today we have over 200 product categories, from fashion and accessories like watches, bags, jewelry, footwear, and to home where you have decor, furniture, furnishings, crockery, whole bunch of stuff like that. How does one take that through the entire category list and saying that, hey, ikat will play a good and decent enough role here, but maybe not here. So I think that is where about 4 5 years ago, when marketing and brand kind of worked 50-50 on this to own the visual language, so to speak. So one is, how do we work around from the inspiration that we've got both from India and the stories that we've got here, and from globally what's happening, and how do we translate that into the Chumbak design language, so to speak. So I think it's been a journey from that India themed auto rickshaw kind of thing that we started off in 2010 all the way to 2021, where we're doing far more mature themes and stuff like that. So it's been a journey. And obviously, as I said, product has also evolved through that.
So, Chumbak as a brand was visible and growing when you decided to get into retail. You now follow a hybrid model of online and offline presence. So, with digital growing strong, we as marketing students would like to understand the reason behind investing heavily in retail outlets. And is there a particular trend that you see here?
So I think one of the very things that we decided from day one was that we were going to be a hybrid model. I'm not an online company. I'm not an offline company. There are, online has always played a large enough role where it's not like 5 10%, but you know, from an average of about 30 35% to post COVID, where it's a 50%, right? Uh, Online has always been an extremely strong part of our business. And along the way, what we've realized is that uh, I wanted to build stores day one, but we didn't have the money to build stores. Stores are expensive to build. And one of the key things that we've learned is that uh, you have to do a combination of both to reach out to the consumer. Stores build trust, stores build brand far cheaper than it is to build that online. Without advertising large enough store, people know, okay, I trust this thing, it's here, it's not going to go anywhere. I see a large sign here, it's like a big, free billboard for me in that sense. But I think along the way, what we've realized is that consumers, while they may shop, and their journeys are kind of similar, both online and offline from that sense, what we've realized is that almost 28%, if not slightly higher right now, do a mix of both. So there are consumers who shop only offline. There are consumers who shop only online, but the overlap is almost a 30%. So you may start your journey online, move off to offline. You may start your journey offline, move into online. But I think both play a very different role. And for a category like ours, where it's a lot of touch and feel, uh, and as we've gotten into larger categories and price points increasing, there's a lot of considered purchases also. So I think our model of online offline kind of hybrid has really worked for us. And I think offline, keeps taking that uh, thing of, oh God, it's so expensive, it's so this. Off Online is as expensive. You have to spend on social media platforms, you have to spend on other internet platforms to bring in paid consumers. It's not that organically the world is coming in saying, hey, let me this morning wake up and type in chumbak.com and wow, that's the cost of my business. But that's why I said, so the idea was that once we did this and we did open stores in 2012, we opened smaller format kiosks. 2014, we started opening our larger format stores. Today, we have almost 75 stores across the country, in almost like 20 plus cities, where we're able to access these people. And now, with our entire omni-channel kind of play, it's very simple, where stores are shipping out your order. So you place an order, say at 9 a.m. in the morning, by 6 p.m. you have your order, and in which has been shipped out from your store there. So I think all these, with tech playing a large enough role, online and offline coming together, I think a hybrid model has really worked for us.
Agreed, sir, agreed. So, sir, at Mica, we have this course called Customer Experience Design, where we try to understand different consumer personas, and how to build a meaningful and engaging experiences for them. So, on that note, we wish to know how has the brand progressed in terms of products and experiences? How imperative do you think is crafting a unique customer experience to a brand?
So I think obviously the brand has kind of moved from in leaps and bounds, right? As I said, we started off as a souvenir company, and today you're a lifestyle brand. And when you fill in the blanks of those 10 years, we started off. If you divide the journey into, let's say, three large kind of pillars or paths, so as to speak. One is the entire design part of it, because Chumbak is known for design, and that's what we're you know that's what is the core of our company. Uh, we started off as I told you, the India theme. We went into India inspired, and obviously over a period of time have moved into very global mature design, which is the Chumbak visual language. Uh, if you look at the entire distribution part of it, how do I reach consumers, right? We've always from day one been both online and offline. Chumbak.com was there from day one. But from an offline perspective, there's been a huge change. You look at the kind of the first 2 years, I think, maybe even 2 to 3 years, we were selling through single mom and pop stores across the country, chain stores across the country, basically other people's point of sale, right? We didn't own anything of that, didn't own the experience, didn't own any of that. One of the biggest points that for us to have actually looked out and said, hey, listen, I think it's time to do our thing, is when the feedback that we got saying that, hey, I love Chumbak, but I can't see all of it at one place. So like a bookstore would only do the stationery part of it, or like an apparel thing would only do the t-shirt and boxers part of it, or someone will. And that's when we said, hey, listen, I think it's time to try out physical retail, and that's when we started our own kiosk, which are the smaller kiosks. Fast forward another 2.5 years, when we realized, listen, it's fantastic for the product that you had then, which was souvenirs and how do I say, those collectibles and stationery and accessories. Now you moved into home, you definitely need much larger. Can you imagine putting a sofa in the middle of a 100 feet space kiosk, 100 square foot kiosk, or crockery to be displayed like that? You can't. You need large format stores. So the kind of journey that the entire distribution had was extremely large over a period of time. And as I said, the product. We moved. So if you look at the design, then there's the distribution, and the last one is the product. We started off as magnets and keychains and souvenirs and collectibles, and have morphed into this thing where there's fashion is a large vertical, there's home which is a large vertical, there's beauty which is a large growing vertical. So I think along the way, that kind of transformation has occurred at key points, and each one has triggered the other. Or I can't do it in kiosks, I need it in stores. Oh, I'm doing fashion, design has to change from this to this. And that's the way that I think the kind of path that we've taken. And from a customer experiences perspective, at each time we've kind of looked at it from a customer's perspective. I remember uh, when we did our first store in Bangalore, and we moved from a literal, like an average of like 100 square feet, were our kiosks or small kiosks that we had in malls, which were our pop-ups in that sense. Overnight we moved from that to, suddenly Chumbak became a 2,500 square foot store. And the time that we spent on the smallest of things, but when I now look back, are so important. We spent almost 3 to 3.5 months to understand what kind of lighting the store should have. What was the kind of temperature of the kind of lighting? Is it a warmer? What does it say about the brand? Is it a bright store? Is it a slightly darker store? Is it a yellow light? Is it white light? Is it all of those things? So lighting took us 3 months. Uh, we spent, in fact, even more than that, trying to understand what is the music that a consumer should be hearing when they walk into the store. So uh, we looked at the kind of demographic that we had. We had people coming in as low as 12, 14-year-olds. We had people as old as 40, 45. uh, and the average dwell time in a store was close to, at that time I remember, close to about 23 to 24 minutes. It's about 30, 35 now, where they would walk around the store and trying to look at the kind of different products, and hey, I didn't know Chumbak had this, I didn't know. So they're there for about 24 minutes, each total of about 6 to 7 songs. that would have played in those 20 to 24 minutes. It was extremely imperative that the brief that we gave the brand team at that time was that, hey, listen, I need to be able to hum along, at least in my mind, to a song which I know. So if you're playing Justin Bieber for the 12 or 14-year-old, I need Beatles for a 40 or 50-year-old in that same 30 minutes or that 24 minutes that person is there. So the
Wow.
music that we made had to be catering to each of these people. So even today in a Chumbak store that you do, there is no one genre of music that you do. You will continue, you will hear a Taylor Swift, you will hear a Billie Eilish. Suddenly you will go back and hear the Beatles. So I think the greatest kind of compliment we got was uh, consumers coming in and telling us that the moment we enter a Chumbak store, we leave our worries outside, you know, and the Chumbak stores is like a happy place for us. So I think
For
that's
sure.
the kind of goal that we wanted to reach with small things, right? As I said, music, what is a store fragrance, what does it smell like, and obviously the kind of layout and all of that, those are normal. But what does the store look like in terms of the lighting? So I think we spend inordinate amounts of time in that trying to understand customer journeys. And even now, this morning I was at the warehouse and trying to understand, you know, from a customer delight perspective, when a customer opens the package, what are we doing wrong? What is it that I can go a little higher? What does a box need to smell nice, or is it just corrugated box? What is, so I think that really gives us joy in trying to understand that, what are those triggers for customer delight, and how can we keep improving it every day, because we're learning every single day, right? So yeah.
So, a lot of us at Mica ponder over the entrepreneurship route. What would you advise young entrepreneurs who are just starting out and may or may not be 100% sure?
I think an the being an entrepreneur is an extremely satisfying but extremely difficult job. It's one of the most loneliest jobs in the world, honestly. Your troubles are your troubles alone. You're not sharing them. You're not passing them on to your boss. You're not doing none of that stuff, right? The buck starts with you and ends with you. The dirty work is all yours. There is no like, hey, that person will do it. Does not happen. You start it, you do it, you end it. I think there is no advice for us to say in that sense, except that do it for the right reasons and don't be ashamed of the reason. So, for example, Shubhra and I started it because we were extremely passionate about product, we were extremely passionate about design, and we thought that we could. And I'm extremely passionate about building a good brand. So, if I can do that, fantastic. But there are some entrepreneurs who start companies and saying, "Listen, I want to make it rich." Fair enough. That's your kind of passion, and that's what's driving you. So, fantastic. But never confuse the two in that sense, saying that your what state upfront what your passions are and know them. Don't lie to yourself, saying that, hey, listen, I'm not in it for the money, I'm not in it for this, I'm not in it for that. uh, know exactly what your drive is and why a particular startup or a thing would kind of solve that inner need to start a company as such. The second and actually the most important thing is, are you solving a problem? If you're solving a problem and you can actually believe, and you've spent countless and endless nights in bed thinking, man, I can do a better job than that idiot. Man, that company really sucks. Their customer service sucks. Their product sucks. I really believe I can do it. Do it. So I think know that you're problem solving a problem, and know that you're the reason why you're starting it in the first place. Know those reasons, whatever they may be. So I think that's the only thing. And as I keep telling people, it's extremely lonely, boring, full of hard work, zero glam. That's an entrepreneur's life. Be ready for that. You're not going to see your friends for a couple of years. You're not going to have money for loads of those years. If you're up to all of that, then this is the job for you.
Right. Very interesting. So, most entrepreneurs battle with their biggest fears, thoughts like what if the new product fails and so on. So, in this regard, do you keep a plan B ready or do you believe that taking risks is a part of the plan?
Entrepreneurs are born risk takers. If you do not take risks, I mean, you're better off sitting in that 9 to 5 job. uh, you have to understand that you will fail. You may have 20,000 things that you will do, maybe one works. So the idea is that learn from those failures. I think that's the big kind of thing that we've done. And also, interestingly enough, learn from your successes. One is to say, hey, listen, this failed miserably, and I know not to do it in the future. But hey, man, this worked. How the hell do I multiply it by 100? You know? And it's a mixture of both. So it cannot be just from your failures, it's also the successes. How do I extrapolate this damn little small success where I got 10 rupees and make it 10 crores in that sense, right? So I think the failures part of it is proof that you're trying something. I always, at any point in my life, I would always hire a failed entrepreneur than a person in a 9 to 5, because that person knows what it means. That person has got his or her hands dirty and knows exactly how to, and they learn. It toughens you and it hardens you. So risk taking is like, it's like breakfast, man. You have to do it every day, and there will be failures every day. And I keep telling the team, do what you want, fail, continue failing, but don't make the same mistake twice. That means you're not paying attention to why you failed. You know, so I think failures, like, and taking risks, is like part and parcel of entrepreneurship.
Right. So that there is so much to learn from you and your brand, but we wish to know what has been your biggest learning from Chumbak so far.
I have many learnings. I mean, and which are very, how do I say, unique to Chumbak itself. Not maybe not something that anyone would learn from that film. But I think the biggest learning that we've had at Chumbak is that brand is everything. Uh, you can, you can do any product, any design, any distribution, any store will open, store close, website crash ho gaya. None of that matters as long as you're taking care of your brand. And at Chumbak, from day one, we've made sure that our brand has been our guiding north star, so as to speak. Any decision that we take will always be put against the brand and say, will this hurt the brand or will it help the brand? Doesn't matter. I'll give you an example. When we were starting our large stores, right? Uh, it meant that also we had almost about 40 of these pop-up kiosks across malls in some 14, 15 cities. It meant closing down those, kiosks, because at some point we realized that consumers are going to be confused. Who is Chumbak? Is Chumbak this large format store that's selling home and all of this stuff, or is Chumbak this small pop-up that I see in a mall? Uh, at that point in time, uh, the question we asked ourselves is, do we keep these kiosks open? Uh, and the answer was from the brand saying that, listen, if you keep the kiosks open while they're doing really well, they're almost 60% of your revenue, which you're going to shut down overnight over a period of a quarter. Uh, you're going to be hurting the brand in the long run. And that's when we realized, listen, that kiosks can't survive at the same time stores can. And stores, from its environment, from its customer experience, from all of that stuff that I spoke about earlier, are a far superior way of interacting with consumers. So overnight we started closing down all those kiosks, 40 of them across the country. And that was a call that brand took, not a sales call or a product call or anything like that. I think that you're hurting the brand, it's going to hurt you later. You don't want to be seen as a small kiosk brand. You want to be seen as a large store, large format brand. So while it hurt revenue for 6 months, it was the best decision that we took, because brand was built and not hurt. So our biggest learning is, keep, I mean, for us, has been, brand has been our guiding north star, and any decision that we've taken is protect the brand at all costs. Anything else can fail. You can, have some quality of a product may break, courier may be late, or online web may crash, or some pictures when it says bag, it's showing a shoe or some stupid thing like that.
Agreed, sir. So, sir, as marketers, we could totally connect with everything you shared. So, now on a closing note, is there any recommendation that you would like to share with us, which is essential to you in your life? It could be a quote, a book, any particular movie, or just anything.
Um, I think two, three things that uh, I tell everybody at Chumbak, right? I think one of the things that we've learned along the way is that out of the many things, one is I think get your hands dirty. It's so critical, and we see, we're a extremely young team. Our average age at Chumbak is like 25 or 26 from all the 300-400 people that we have. So it's an extremely young team. So it's extremely hungry, extremely driven team. Uh, and I think one of the biggest pieces of advice that we've always said is that you're always going to face problems. You're always going to take risks because that's the culture of the company. You're going to experiment. You're going to go wrong. You're going to go right sometimes. Uh, have to be self-driven enough and passionate enough that you do these things. But the moment you fail, have zero ego and raise your hand and say help, right? And that we've seen at multiple enough points in time where, you know, the kind of feedback that we've gotten is tremendous. And I think the other thing is that what we've learned in, in go-to-market strategies is honestly one of the big things that we've learned is good today is better than perfect tomorrow, right? We've seen a whole number of people constantly trying to have the perfect business plan, the perfect logo, the perfect this. No, that perfection is a myth. It doesn't exist. And in today's day and age, we've always realized that you have to get out there and actually start. Make your mistakes, learn from them, and keep building on top of those things. So yeah, I think main thing is get your hands dirty. I think that's the biggest piece of uh, advice that I can give anybody who's wanting to start out. I think get your hands dirty and do it for the right reasons.
Amazing, sir. And that brings us to a close. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. It's been a sheer pleasure hosting you on my cast. I'm sure the listeners are going to have a lot to take away from this particular episode. We look forward to more interactions with you in the near future. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Yeah.